Yeah, absolutely. We're going to move on from that. You guys pretty much hit a lot of what I was going to tell you. So right off the bat, I love the hierarchy aspect. That's probably the first thing that I would point out here is the fact that the title is very large and bold at the very top. It kind of goes in order. You start at the top and go 1, 2, 3 towards the bottom. And of course, most important information up until least important information. In addition, there's a legible font, which I would say is also pretty important. It's a sans font, which means it's, as you said, modern, kind of sleek, very easy to read. And moving on to the graphic, color choice, of course, is a very important one. I use contemporary colors, which if you're not familiar what contemporary colors are, sorry, complementary colors, very different things. I use blue and orange, which are opposite on the color wheel, and they tend to be more pleasing to the eye because of their differences. I only used one graphic because I don't want it to be too distracting to you. I want you to get exactly what I'm trying to communicate, which is that this is about UI UX design. The graphic tells a lot, so I put a plain background. I believe someone said that it was just, very solid background on the back, but interesting graphic on the front. So once again, I'm going to ask you guys a question. Just if anybody is familiar with UI and UX, I would like to know what your first thoughts of it are, or what you first heard of it. Yeah. Absolutely. Having an audience, a target audience in mind, specifically could be technical or design wise for making some sort of product. Anyone else have thoughts on that? Yes, absolutely. Navigation is a very big thing, especially when you're working in the technical field and you're making some kind of digital product. Navigating that product is very important because not everyone is tech savvy. Not everyone knows how to use every single application or anything of that sort. So yeah, that is essentially it. But before I even go to what UX is, UI is kind of like an entry level into UX because UI, aka user interface, is something that a lot of us are familiar with visually speaking. Whether you use a phone, a computer, a tablet, a TV, all of those things have a screen and thus entail an interface. And if you kind of imagine removing the screen from it and rather think of it as in like you are the user coming into contact with the digital elements. That is what the user interface is. To make a user interface, there's a very common draft that is used in this field, which is called a wireframe. It is essentially like a blueprint for a web/digital design, or like a skeletal framework. And to kind of see this in action, I put an example of Snapchat. When you use Snapchat, you don't really think about this stuff, but this is one of the first drafts that Snapchat kind of proposed to this company, kind of putting these elements on a very, very simple layout. No colors involved, no fonts involved, really. It's just grayscale. This is what it should look like. The purpose of making a user interface is not the design first. It's the usability first. It's the functionality. It's how are these users going to press this button? What are they going to see first? Is it even easy to use? And of course, Snapchat did not start off that easy. So the very important process. So when it comes to user experience, this is just a very general definition that we've already touched upon. It's the overall experience of a person using a product such as a website or computer application, especially in terms of how easy or pleasing it is to use. Easy is the pretty key word here. It's a very rudimentary word, but it's important nonetheless because that's what we want. We want things to be easy. We don't want to think too hard about using like a social media app or have it be too complicated. And of course, this entails design in itself, where UX design is to deliver solutions to address branding, design, usability, and function. It's essentially just like the catch-all of what we are talking about. There's a lot of specialization in UX design. There's a lot that goes into it, but two that I'm kind of pointing out here is research and writing. UX research is the first step. Very first step into making a product. How are you going to make a product for someone if you don't even know what they want? If you kind of focus too much on your client being like, I want these aspects in my application. Well, if you include all of that, people are probably not going to want it. It might be too complicated and it might be too overwhelming for the user. So it's to study the target audience to reveal this important information about potential users. And And writing is kind of one of the minor ones, but I thought was interesting because I only recently like really researched into what UX writing is. It's essentially the very minuscule like text and microcopy that you see on a website, stuff like menus and buttons and labels and chat boxes. These very small things that you might not think about, just kind of do on a daily basis. That was written by a person, and they especially had in mind how the user would navigate all the menus. Like, does it make sense and stuff like that. And a quick little anecdote, actually, kind of on this next slide. As I said before, there's a lot that goes into it, and a couple more areas that I kind of want to point out, but not go too into detail is experience strategy, information architecture, and human-computer interaction. A lot of this is probably familiar. But in addition to this, I actually recently spoke to a UX strategist working for like government digital applications, and I was talking to her about how she even got into UX. Like, how do you just get into like the UX field? Did she start off like knowing exactly what she wanted? Turns out no. She was a sociology major in college, graduated with a sociology degree, and went into government policy for 10 years, and realized maybe this isn't really for me. And after that, she kind of discovered the world of UX and found out that her sociology experience, psychology experience, public speaking experience with, giving public policy to these stakeholders, like these kinds of interactions in her everyday life ended up getting her a UX job. And that was kind of like insane to me. So I would highly recommend kind of looking into how maybe your pathway could lead into this if you're interested. So we're actually going to do an activity for the next part of this, but before that, I'm going to explain what this is going to entail. So there are several different methods of doing UX research. Probably the most common one that you know of is like having surveys. After you use like an app, it's like, rate us 5 stars. And then you're like, no, thanks, because who needs to do that? No one's going to spend time to do that. But most effectively, UX research comes when the researcher approaches the audience. They kind of seek out people, be like, hey, play test this game, or hey, test out this application. Like these kinds of things where you sought out to create this group of audiences to test out your interface is really important. So one method that isn't really common in like all of UX, but it will be for the one I'm going to talk about, is called card sorting. So it's a method that specifically observes how people categorize information. I have an example on the right side of like different foods, and then 3 categories on the right. You probably would use card sorting to figure out how people would very naturally just sort out these different elements. So it's to create just a very rudimentary version of navigation and an information system. And of course, the only things that you need is the cards and the test subjects. So there's 2 different kinds of card sorting. There is the closed card sorting, which, as I had shown before, it is just me giving you the categories. I give you everything that you need, and it's all up to you to just do whatever you want with it. So let's say that I gave red, yellow, and green, and this person organized them into this order. Might seem very simple, but let's specifically wanted to know how a person would categorize pepper, because technically that could be any of these colors. So I want to know, how would this person first categorize it? What's the first thing that they would put? And they would put it in red. There's also open card sorting, which is precisely the opposite. I don't give you any categories at all. And this might be harder for some specific projects, but it also could be more useful for me, because maybe I don't want to know what category they put in. I want to know what categories they come up with to put this information in. So let's say I don't care about colors. Like, why would I want to know what color each food is? I want to know what fruits there are and what vegetables there are, and then they categorize it that way. So before I throw you into the deep end, I'm just going to show very quickly an example of what I want to see. So first, some questions to consider when categorizing the elements that you're going to do is, are the categories accurate to the information that it provides? Are the tabs easy to navigate? Are they visible? Are there enough categories? Too many categories? Is it just a whole bunch of jargon that I don't really care about? I'm going to very appropriately use the UMD grad school website. Hopefully they don't come after me, because I'm going to critique it pretty hard. But essentially what your activity is going to have these categories, which are the tabs of a website. And then you're going to have other words that are going to go into these tabs. So for example, we have the graduate school website and we have the about section, seems pretty standard. They have the staff, diversity, newsroom, calendar. Honestly, I think this is way too much for just the about section. this is what they chose to do. They have the admissions, which appropriately has all this information, graduate programs, funding, policies, et cetera, et cetera. I'll do one more example with the World Wildlife. This one's very simple. They just have 3 tabs at the top and straight to the point. They have our work, get involved, about us, and they're done. So they have all this information just in these 3, and they keep it pretty simple and concise. So you might notice there are 4 sets of cards on the table. There's one here, kind of in the middle-ish, one in the back, one here, one here. I think this one is the closed card sort, and this is the open card sort. Feel free to participate however you want to. You don't have to, but I think it's fun. So the prompt here is that Gnosis Arts, an independent agency that funds art education, wants to revamp their website. Who is drawing? You better expose yourself right now. Wants to revamp their website. It's very outdated and all their navigation tabs need to be updated before the web developers can get started. That's a key part. Before the web developers can even get started on these changes, to even program these things, the UX researchers need to decide to hold a card sort to better inform themselves on how they should design this. Kind of a little bit of elaboration. The process in making like a digital application, it doesn't necessarily need to start with the programming. I think that's probably a very outdated process that you might have seen with older websites or older products where things work, but do they look good? Do they function well? Do I like it? Like, do I even like looking at this website? I probably won't even bother trying to navigate if it doesn't look good. So we are going to do a bit of an activity. So if you would like to get into your groups, again, there's open card sort here and closed card sort here. There's 4 different sets of cards. You're just going to sort out these cards into your categories, and we're going to reconvene in about 5-ish, 10 minutes. And yeah. Hi, virtual people. I will address you all now. So you can actually still do this at home. If you have like a notebook with you or even your phone or a notes app, anything of that sort, I put the categories up here. You guys will be doing a open card sort. I will explain once again, these different terms here on the slide, you are going to have the job of categorizing them into some sort of website. So let's say that you have an about section, a home section, a contact section, arts section, anything of that sort. You're going to take these terms and categories however you desire. And let me know if you guys have any questions. Yeah, you won't be put in groups unless you want me to put you guys in breakout rooms, but that probably will take some time. You could, if you're here in Technica right now in person, you could get in a group if you're like sitting outside or if you're sitting with some friends, like that's also very fun. Sorry, I'll explain your question. I think Lina. So people are getting in groups in person in the classroom, but unfortunately I can't enforce groups virtually. But if you are like currently in Technica or if you're around people, you can get in groups. But otherwise this would just be an individual activity. All right, we'll get started on our findings. Would anyone like to volunteer? And there's no wrong answer. I won't drone you or anything like that, maybe. On what kind of made more sense for them in their card sort. Anyone want to share? Yeah. Mhm.
Showcase had all of like the visual forming art stuff, so like filmography.
Mhm.
Events had only upcoming past events, contact us, faculty staff. The very end, that's work.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. Okay, anyone from the open card sort? I know y'all probably had a little harder, so. All good, all good. I essentially kind of came up with the same as the closed card sort. Specifically, I kind of tricked you just a little bit. I didn't put anything under home or contact us because those are kind of by themselves. Typically, when you see a home page, you probably won't have any extra other tabs. But if you really want to, there's no wrong answer again. So for about, I put the our history, our mission, our founder, faculty and staff, and the FAQ. Showcase, exact same things. That was pretty self-explanatory. That one, the events too. And then for support, there was donate, join our team, and newsletter. And then contact us didn't have anything. But again, this is all dependent on what you believe to fit under these things. If a lot of users for this card sort did exactly what you did, they're probably like, oh, well, that seems like something that's intuitive for my audience, so maybe we should go with that. And yeah. So that was kind of the closing end. Thank you so much for coming to my workshop. Yeah. If you ever need to contact me for anything, of course, I'm interested in UI UX, but I'm also immersive media design major. I do computer science, professional writing, art technology, any of those things. Feel free to talk to me, and I'll respond as quickly as I can. But thank you so much. Absolutely.